It started like most Wednesdays in our quiet suburban neighborhood. Silent sprinklers hissing before sunrise, golden lights slipping between freshly painted fences, and the comforting sound of morning routines. I had just pulled into the driveway after a 14-hour night shift. A fresh bag of groceries sat in the back seat, still fogged with condensation. My name is Marcus, and I'm the newly appointed police chief of a suburban town tucked deep in the hills of North Carolina. No one knew that part yet, not even my neighbors. To them, I was just a new guy in Lot 14. Quiet, keeps to himself, drives a nondescript dark gray Explorer with government plates. I hadn't worn the uniform publicly in months. Being the new chief had its perks, including the luxury of working plain clothes while the department settled into a new routine. I was fine with that. Less small talk, fewer awkward encounters. But anonymity, as it turns out, wasn't always a blessing. My neighborhood, Sandalwood Estates, is one of those hyper-regulated HOA zones where everything looks like it came off the same assembly line. Every house beige, every lawn trim. Mailboxes had to be the exact Model 202B with bronze flag, no exceptions. Even the basketball hoops had to be retractable or hidden from street view. It was all about community harmony, or so they claimed in the welcome packet. On that particular morning, I was unloading groceries. Just 3 brown paper bags, nothing dramatic, when I heard the crunch of gravel and the slow growl of an idling SUV. A shiny white Escalade rolled up, windows down, and inside sat a teenage boy with the kind of smugness that only grows from unchecked entitlement. His window lowered with a mechanical whir, and he stared at me like I was standing on his property. "Hey," he barked, "you got any more of those chips in that bag?" At first, I thought he was joking. I laughed politely. "Excuse me?" I said. He repeated, louder this time, "I want some of those chips. My mom forgot to buy some, and I'm hungry." I blinked, caught somewhere between disbelief and secondhand embarrassment. "I'm not sure I understand. These are my groceries." He rolled his eyes like I'd just inconvenienced his entire worldview. "You people always act like everything's yours." I froze. "You people?" There was no ambiguity in his tone, his voice, the smirk, the lazy slouch in the driver's seat. It was all intentional. He wasn't just demanding snacks. He was asserting something uglier. It wasn't about chips. It was about control. I didn't respond right away. My hands were still full, bag handles biting into my fingers. The boy leaned out the window a little more. "What? You don't speak English now." I took a breath, set the bags down on the curb. "Go home, kid." He sneered and floored the gas just enough to spray dust across the bottom of my slacks before whipping the Escalade around and speeding back toward the cul-de-sac. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Later that afternoon, after I had showered and tried to grab a few hours of sleep, I woke up to knocking. Not loud, not frantic, just an annoying tap, 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 like someone trying to be polite while itching for a fight. I groggily opened the door, and standing there was Karen. Not her actual name, of course, but the name everyone eventually uses when a clipboard comes out and the rules suddenly matter more than common sense. Karen lived in Lot 10, tall, bleach blonde, with a severe bob cut and a face always pinched in some flavored disapproval. She wore a lemon-yellow cardigan that looked like it had never been stained or wrinkled. Her HOA badge dangled from a thin gold chain around her neck like a sacred medallion. "I need to speak with you about a disturbance this morning," she began, her voice syrupy but tight. "Good morning," I offered flatly. "Something wrong." "There's been a complaint filed," she said, glancing down at her clipboard, "regarding a confrontation you had with one of our residents' children." He felt extremely threatened. My brow furrowed. "Threatened?" She nodded solemnly. "Apparently you made verbal threats and refused to share food in a time of need." I blinked. "What?" "I understand if you're not familiar with the community guidelines yet," she continued, ignoring me, "but Sandalwood Estates encourages neighborly support. If a child is hungry—" "He wasn't hungry," I interrupted. "He was demanding groceries from my car window, and he insulted me." She sighed. "I'm just here to document the issue. Also, there's been another report about your vehicle. We notice it doesn't match the HOA's approved parking list. It's unregistered with the HOA, and technically, government license plates are not permitted unless authorized in writing. You'll need to park that car inside your garage or face a $250 fine. I stared at her, speechless. You'll also need to attend a hearing at the clubhouse next Tuesday, she added with a small, victorious smile. That's mandatory. The door closed in her face before I could stop my hand. I stood in the hallway, heart pounding, not because I was afraid, but because I was furious. They were coming after me over nothing. Over chips, over a government vehicle, over a false report from a kid raised by a woman who smiled while issuing fines for groceries. What they didn't know, what Karen didn't know, was that the man she just tried to bully was a top-ranking law enforcement officer in the entire county. I had authority that trumped their entire little clipboard kingdom. And while I wasn't planning to throw my badge around, I wasn't about to let this slide. As I stood in my kitchen and sipped cold coffee, I replayed the scene in my head again and again. The boys' sneer, Karen's condescension, the ridiculous threat of fines for parking a government-issued vehicle. I wasn't just going to show up to that hearing. I was going to dismantle the entire farce of their authority. And it would start with next Tuesday, at the HOA meeting, in uniform. Tuesday came faster than I expected, and with it came the weight of knowing what I had to walk into. The HOA clubhouse stood like a miniature courthouse at the edge of the subdivision, red brick, white columns, and a blue sign that read Sandalwood Estates Community Harmony Hall, in serif lettering that desperately tried to sound official. I pulled into the lot 5 minutes early, still in uniform, dark navy, polished badge, radio on my shoulder, and the unmistakable presence of someone who didn't come to be lectured. As I stepped out of the SUV, I noticed people already gathered inside through glass windows. Karen was at the head of the room, surrounded by 3 other board members who looked like they spent more time alphabetizing bylaws than speaking to their own neighbors. One of them, a bald man in a sweater vest, glanced up and visibly stiffened when he saw me walking toward the door in full uniform. I opened the door slowly. Silence. Karen's mouth twitched. Oh, officer. She trailed off, clearly trying to remember my last name from the bogus complaint form. We didn't expect, well, I didn't think. It's Chief Brooks, I said plainly, offering no smile. A few neighbors turned around. A couple raised eyebrows. One woman near the back leaned over and whispered something to her husband. I could feel the tension shifting, like dry leaves about to catch fire. Karen cleared her throat. Right. Chief, this isn't a criminal matter. Of course. Just a community discussion. We're glad you're here voluntarily. I'm here because you summed me under threat of fines, I said, taking a seat directly across from her, and because I think this community needs some clarity about what authority the HOA actually has and what it doesn't. There was a long, uncomfortable pause before the bald man in the vest coughed into his hand and said, Let's proceed with the agenda. Karen adjusted her reading glasses. Yes, right. Item 1, confrontation involving resident Marcus Brooks and minor resident Tyler Emerson. She looked directly at me, like she expected a rebuttal. I offered nothing. Karen continued. According to the complaint filed by Mrs. Emerson and her son, Mr. Brooks used threatening language and failed to act neighborly toward a minor in need. Furthermore, he has violated parking guidelines with a vehicle not registered with the community parking list and parked visibly in front of his home. Let me ask you something, I said, calmly but deliberately. Are you aware that the vehicle in question is a law enforcement vehicle assigned to the chief of police for this county? Karen blinked. I didn't know that. And are you aware, I added, voice steady, that impersonating or obstructing an on-duty officer or misrepresenting legal authority over one can fall under state interference statutes? Now she blinked faster. We're just enforcing HOA rules. No, I interrupted, leaning forward. You're weaponizing bylaws against someone you didn't realize had jurisdiction that extends far beyond your printed clipboards. Your son. I turned my head slightly to make sure the room heard it, approached me in my driveway, demanded food out of my grocery bag, then made a racist remark. And your response wasn't to apologize. It was to find me and call a meeting over potato chips. A wave of awkward laughter bubbled from the back of the room. Karen's cheeks flushed. "This isn't about food," she snapped. "This is about behavior. You don't seem to understand the culture we try to maintain in Sandalwood." "Oh, I understand it perfectly," I replied. "I've reviewed your HOA charter, your fine schedule, even the parking regulations you quote so often. And none of it, none, trumps state law, civil rights protections, or basic decency." Karen opened her mouth again, but this time the man in the sweater vest spoke up first. "I think this item can be tabled," he said, trying to sound official. "Seems there's been a misunderstanding." Karen looked around, waiting for anyone, to defend her. No one did. Her power, so potent when she was delivering warnings through mail slots and leaving sticky notes on trash cans, suddenly evaporated when confronted by someone whose badge wasn't plastic. She scribbled something on her clipboard and slammed it closed. "Fine," she muttered, "but I'll be reporting this to the HOA regional office." I stood up. "Be my guest. Want their number? I've got it on speed dial. I met with them last week during a community outreach initiative. Real nice folks. Big on actual accountability." Karen didn't respond. I left the meeting with more eyes following me than when I'd entered. But the story doesn't end there. Because Karen was not someone who let things go quietly. That night, as I pulled up to my house, I noticed a new paper taped to my mailbox. This one wasn't even subtle. It had violation notice stamped in red at the top, and it accused me of unauthorized signage for having a thin blue line bumper sticker visible in my driveway. The note demanded its removal or else face a $500 fine. Ridiculous. Petty. Illegal. But Karen was escalating, and this time, she wasn't hiding behind HOA policy alone. She was trying to provoke me into reacting publicly. Maybe hoping I'd overstep, lash out, or break some minor infraction she could blow out of proportion. I was a threat to her authority now, and she wanted me gone. I installed a new Ring camera the next morning. Motion activated. Full HD, Wi-Fi connected. It faced my mailbox and driveway, just in case any more anonymous notices magically appeared during the night. And sure enough, they did. Over the next 4 days, I received 5 different violation slips. One for aggressive posture during an HOA meeting. One for intimidating presence due to uniform visibility. One for unauthorized government surveillance device, referring to my Ring camera. One for excessively large grocery deliveries, citing community aesthetics. And one for passive refusal to comply with community tone expectations. I didn't even know that last one was real. I looked it up. It wasn't. This wasn't policy. This was personal. Karen had gone from HOA enforcer to HOA stalker. She was papering my life with fabricated infractions, and every time I removed one of her bogus notices, the next was more absurd than the last. It was becoming clear. She wasn't just trying to make me uncomfortable. She wanted me to leave. What she didn't realize was that I was building a case. Every violation notice went into a folder. Every Ring cam notification was saved to the cloud. Every neighbor who whispered, "I saw her putting that paper on your car last night," became a willing witness. She had no idea the entire street was turning against her. Quietly, gradually, but unmistakably. And then came the final insult. Saturday morning. Groceries again. I was walking up my path with a bag under each arm when I noticed the Escalade idling near the curb. Tyler, Karen's son, leaned out of the passenger window, holding his phone up, recording me. "Hey, look, guys," he shouted his phone. "He's doing it again, harassing us while we're just trying to drive down the street. This is like the 3rd time." I stopped mid-step. Another camera. Another setup. Another attempt to manufacture a moment. I set the groceries down, calmly pulled out my own phone, and began recording. "Say hi to internal affairs," I said, loud enough for the mic to catch. "Your mom's got a pattern. So, do you? Smile." He rolled the window up fast, and the Escalade peeled off. That clip? It would become the first exhibit. But the real revenge? That was still loading. And when it dropped, it wouldn't just clear my name. It would end Karen's HOA reign. Publicly. Revenge. At least a kind worth savoring doesn't come loud. It doesn't arrive with shouting, threats, or angry letters. It begins in the quiet, gathered like dry timber. And Karen had been stacking that wood for weeks, completely unaware I held a matchbook. After Tyler's stunt with the phone, I knew her game had shifted from policy to entrapment. So I shifted too, not with anger, but with calculation. First move? I filed an official report, not with the HOA, but through internal channels at the sheriff's department. Not to press charges, but to log behavior. That's the thing about being a police chief. You don't need to overreact. You just need to record. Systematically. Coldly. I created a new case file and logged every HOA violation she'd printed, dated, and left taped to my home. I added my Ring camera footage to a cloud-based evidence locker. Then I spoke to the city's zoning board under the pretense of a community audit. A few favors here, a lunch meeting there, and suddenly I had access to all the public HOA filings for Sandalwood Estates. Every fine issued, every complaint filed, every board member's voting record. And guess whose name came up the most? Karen Emerson. 412 complaints issued in 16 months. Nearly 30% of them against non-white homeowners. Not just petty, not just annoying, patterned, discriminatory, legally actionable. I knew I'd need more than just numbers. So I began talking, carefully, casually, with neighbors. One by one, they opened up. An Indian family down the street had been fined $150 for hanging wind chimes that were too colorful. A Latino couple got a letter warning them that their outdoor gatherings were drawing attention. A single black woman was cited 3 times for having unregistered guests when her adult son visited. I kept the conversation short, respectful, no uniform, no authority thrown around, just a neighbor asking questions. But the more I asked, the more stories poured out, and slowly I saw what Karen had built. She wasn't just the annoying HOA stickler. She was a gatekeeper, one who used policies to create walls, divide homes, and quietly push out the people she didn't want near her cul-de-sac kingdom. And she almost got away with it, until she tried it with the wrong guy. The second phase of my retaliation was quieter still, tactical. I began responding to her letters, but not with emotion, with legal language. Each HOA violation I received, I replied in writing. Carbon copy to both the HOA's regional supervisor and the State Homeowners' Rights Commission. Every reply was signed Marcus J. Brooks, Chief of Police. Let me tell you, nothing makes a petty bureaucrat squirm like the sudden awareness that their target is a high-ranking civil servant with receipts, a badge, and the legal vocabulary to bring it all crashing down. Karen's tone shifted. Fast. Instead of bold warnings taped my door, I started getting friendly reminders. Instead of passive-aggressive fines, I got carefully worded suggestions. But it was too late, because the community had begun to notice. That brings us to my favorite part, the mailbox. HOA policy in Sandalwood dictated that all mailboxes must be painted eggshell beige and mounted at precisely 48 inches. No more, no less. But nothing in the rules said I couldn't decorate around it. So I bought a small American flag. Then I added a solar-powered police badge emblem. Then I placed a plaque below it that read, "This box monitored by law enforcement. HOA notices logged as official correspondence." It wasn't illegal. It wasn't aggressive. But it was visible and symbolic. Neighbors began asking where they could get one. Within a week, 3 more houses had matching plaques. By the end of the month, a full third of the street had posted small signs reading, "Monitored by Ring. Notices filed with State." Karen hated it. She tried to cite me again, this time claiming I was intimidating residents through signage. That was the final straw. I scheduled a meeting, not with her HOA, but with the Sandalwood Estates Master Council, the regional board above Karen's chapter, a real oversight committee with attorneys and voting power. I brought everything, my folder, my Ring footage, my neighbor affidavits, a data analysis showing racial bias trends in her violation patterns, and a formal complaint. I didn't walk in like an angry neighbor. I walked in like a professional, a lawman, and I ended my statement with a single line. If this pattern continues, I'll be pursuing civil action on behalf of myself and other affected residents, and I'll be doing it publicly. They were silent, just long enough for the weight to hit. I thanked them and left. The next day, Karen received a letter, not from me, but from the Master Council. It was delivered via certified mail. 3 pages, all formal, all worded like a cease and desist for HOA overreach. She went radio silent after that. But I wasn't done. The final phase of my subtle retaliation was personal, but poetic. Tyler, her entitled teenage son, had a habit of parking his Escalade sideways on the street. Technically a violation, but one that had gone unenforced for months. So I enforced it. As police chief, I ordered targeted parking patrols in residential zones that had repeat complaint clusters. Our traffic officers began issuing real citations, county-level tickets with fines that didn't go to the HOA, but to the courthouse. 3 citations in 10 days. And when Karen stormed into City Hall to protest, she was told to make an appointment. With me, she never did. But something magical happened in the weeks that followed. Neighbors who had been silent began trimming their lawns a little more freely. A family that had once kept their BBQs indoors began hosting again, flags out, chairs on the lawn. Even the Indian family brought their wind chimes back. And the best part? Nobody thanked me directly, because they didn't need to. Karen was still on the HOA board, but she was quiet now. No more papers taped to doors. No more meetings about grocery bags. No more whisper campaigns. She'd been disarmed, legally, socially, symbolically, and she never even saw the blade. The town didn't know it yet, but she'd already lost her crown. Because of final revenge, that was still coming, and it wouldn't be subtle. It would be public, undeniable, and poetic. They say karma is patient, but sometimes karma needs a little push, and I was happy to give it one. By the time summer rolled into Sandalwood Estates, the neighborhood felt different, more awake, more free. Karen's chokehold on the block had weakened, even if she hadn't realized it yet. Her notices had stopped. Her clipboard hadn't been seen in weeks. But she hadn't stepped down. Not yet. She was still clinging to her little title, head of compliance, like a badge of honor, still showing up to board meetings in that pastel lemon sweater, still quietly watching from her porch with binoculars when kids left bikes on sidewalks for more than 10 minutes. Like a queen in exile, waiting for her subjects to fall back in line. But the real reckoning? That came during the annual community meeting in July. Once a year, the HOA opened its doors to the entire subdivision. Normally, only a handful of retirees and board loyalists showed up. But this year, things were different. This year, the room was packed, every seat taken. Folding chairs lined the walls. Some folks stood in the back, arms crossed, lips tight with anticipation. The air buzzed with tension, and something else. Hope. I didn't wear my uniform that night. I didn't need to. Everyone knew who I was by now. Word had spread. The sign on my mailbox had become a meme in the Facebook group. Parents were calling me the HOA Whisperer. Even the grumpy mailman gave me a nod on delivery days. Karen entered the meeting late. She stepped into the room like it was still hers command. Clipboard in hand, lips pursed, hair sprayed into a perfect helmet. But this time, no one moved aside. No one greeted her. The silence was colder than any fine she'd ever written. She made her way to the front and sat beside the other board members. They looked uncomfortable, sweating, eyes darting everywhere except toward her. The regional HOA supervisor, a tall, serious man named Alan Whitmore, took the podium. He began with the usual pleasantries, budget numbers, landscaping contracts, pool maintenance schedules. But it didn't last long. Just as he cleared his throat for the next topic, someone in the back raised a hand. It was Ms. Carter from Lot 7, normally quiet, always polite. Tonight, her voice carried like a bell. "I'd like to propose a special vote," she said. Alan looked confused. Ma'am, special votes aren't on the agenda. It's about the leadership of the compliance committee," she said, louder this time. "It's urgent and relevant." People murmured. Heads nodded. Alan hesitated, then glanced down at the binder in front of him. Well, technically, per Article 4, Section B, the board can entertain motions on the floor if seconded and voted on. I second, came a voice, then another, then another. Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Alan blinked. Okay then, please state the motion. Ms. Carter stepped forward, hand shaking slightly, but her voice never wavered. I motion for the immediate removal of Karen Emerson from her position as head of compliance due to persistent misuse of authority, discriminatory enforcement of bylaws, and the weaponization of policy against neighbors. Silence. Then someone clapped. Just once. Then twice. Then the room erupted. Applause. Cheers. Laughter. Karen stood up, beet red. "This is absurd," she shouted, waving her clipboard like a white flag. "You can't just... This isn't how things are done." "This is exactly how things are done," I said, stepping forward, my voice calm, even, but firm. I pulled a thick manila envelope from under my arm and laid it gently on the table in front of Alan. "Inside," I said, "you'll find documented evidence of repeated bias in enforcement patterns, fraudulent citations, harassment of homeowners, including minors, and coordinated efforts to provoke confrontation." Karen scoffed, but her face had gone pale. "This is slander," she hissed. "No," I said, turned to crowd. "This is truth. The kind you've all felt, but never had the power to name. I just brought the receipts." Alan opened the envelope. His eyes scanned the pages. Ring camera stills, date-stamped violation slips, reports from my department, testimonies, charts. He didn't say a word, but his hands trembled slightly as he passed the documents down the table. Karen tried again. "You're just mad because I enforce the rules. That's what I was elected to do." "No," I said, "you weren't elected to humiliate. You weren't elected to discriminate. And you weren't elected to stalk neighbors over groceries and flags and parking spots. This isn't leadership. It's bullying wrapped in policy." More clapping, this time louder. A woman near the front wiped her eyes. Alan raised his hand. All those in favor of removal? The room went still. Hands shot up, everywhere, a forest of fingers. All opposed. Alan asked. No hands. Not even the other board members. Karen's clipboard slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a pathetic clack. And just like that, she was done. Official. Public. Irrevocable. Karen turned and stormed toward the door, her heels echoing across the linoleum floor. But before she could leave, someone called out, "Hey, Karen, want some chips of the road?" The room exploded with laughter. She didn't look back, didn't say a word, just shoved the door open and disappeared into the dark. After she left, the meeting turned into something more like a block party. People hugged, swapped stories. For the first time in years, the community felt like a community. Someone brought out lemonade. A neighbor passed around cookies shaped like tiny mailboxes. And one by one, people came up and shook my hand. Not because I'd yelled or threatened, but because I'd stood up when it mattered. Because I did let someone use authority as a weapon. And because I had fought back the right way. Later that night, I stood in my driveway, the warm July air humming with crickets. I looked down the street, at kids on scooters, porch lights flicking on, neighbors chatting under string lights. And then I saw it. Karen's house. For sale sign. Fresh. Bright red. Bold white letters. Motivated seller. I smiled. Not out of spite, but because justice doesn't always come with sirens and handcuffs. Sometimes it comes with clipboards crashing, hands rising, and the sweet sound of a woman realizing she no longer runs the show. She had called the cops on me. She just didn't realize I was the one writing the laws. By the time the for sale sign on Karen Emerson's lawn started to fade from the sun, the neighborhood had fully exhaled. It was like someone had opened all the windows after a long winter and finally let the fresh air back in. Her reign over Sandalwood Estates was officially over. No more threats taped to garage doors. No more binoculars peeking between the blinds. No more 6 a.m. emails titled urgent. Trash bins visible from curb line. Just quiet. Just freedom. The cul-de-sac felt human again. But the irony of how it all ended? That part was better than anything I could have planned. It began with a knock at my door. Not from the mailman or another neighbor, but from the very realtor Karen had hired to sell her house. A short woman in a red blazer, clipboard in hand. Smile too wide to be real. "Mr. Brooks?" she chirped, glancing around as if she might be caught talking to me. "I just want to give you a heads up. We'll have a few viewings this week." Karen asked me to pass that along before she left town. "Left?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. I thought she was still in escrow. "Oh, no. She moved out 2 days ago. Couldn't wait to get away, I guess." I nodded, fighting a grin. Interesting. What I didn't tell the realtor was that I'd already seen the U-Haul roll out at 5 a.m. sharp. Karen didn't even say goodbye. No final complaints. No final letters. She slinked out the same way she ruled. Quietly vindictive. Completely alone. The irony? She moved to a non-HOA neighborhood 2 towns over. I knew because the moving company she hired was run by a buddy of mine, an old beat cop turned business owner, who texted me the moment he saw her name on the work order. Karen Emerson. No, HOA at the new place. She says she wants peace. That was the punchline right there. The woman who'd spent years weaponizing bylaws and enforcing community harmony had finally realized she couldn't live under her own rules. She didn't want to follow them. She wanted to control them. Without that control, she had nothing, and she ran. But the deeper irony? It wasn't just about Karen. It was about us. The neighbors she'd silenced. The families she'd fined. The people she'd tried to push out. We didn't just remove her. We replaced her, not with another clipboard tyrant, but with a rotating committee of actual neighbors. Real people. Moms, dads, retired vets, young couples. Folks who understood that enforcing rules shouldn't come at the cost of community. We changed the bylaws, trimmed the fine system in half, allowed lawn furniture that wasn't beige, legalized wind chimes, colored mulch, and yes, even lawn gnomes, as long as they weren't excessively whimsical, a compromise I still chuckle about. And as for me, well, I didn't join the board. That was never my goal. But I was asked to help draft a new community conduct charter, a document that replaced the outdated code of property presentation Karen had waved around like scripture. And guess what was printed on the first page? This community is not built on rules. It is built on people. Neighbors are not enemies. Homes are not battlefields. And respect is not negotiable. Simple, clear, final. One afternoon, a few weeks after Karen had vanished into her beige, regulation-free future, I walked past her old house. It had just been sold to a young black couple from out of state. Military family. 2 kids, a golden retriever the size of a beach ball. They were in the yard already, laughing, installing a tree swing and painting the porch a light ocean blue. I waved. The dad waved back. "Hey," he called. "You the chief everyone's been talking about?" I smiled. "Depends. What have they been saying?" "All good. Real good," he said. "You're the reason we picked this place. Folks here said it's not just a nice street. It's safe. For all of us." I walked away that day feeling lighter than I had in months. Because the true revenge wasn't Karen's downfall. It was everything that came after. The ring cam footage never made it to social media. Never needed to. Justice didn't need to go viral. It just needed to land in the right room at the right time. Tyler? He got ticketed again for blocking a fire lane in his new neighborhood. Different town. Different HOA. Same attitude. The new local police chief called me for a character reference. I gave it to him with documentation. Last I heard, Tyler had enrolled in an online program for business entrepreneurship, selling crypto NFTs of sneakers or something equally forgettable. As for the infamous clipboard, the one Karen used like a scepter, it showed up one day on my porch, wrapped in brown paper. No note, no return address, just a clipboard, split in half, duct taped back together. I mounted it in my garage like a trophy, right next to the sign that used to hang under my mailbox. This box monitored by law enforcement. HOA notices logged as official correspondence. I kept it there as a reminder, not Karen, but of the power of standing firm. of doing things the right way, of beating injustice not with rage, but with records, facts, and relentless integrity, and maybe a little creative pettiness. The neighborhood has changed. We throw block parties now. Lawn chairs come out on weekends. The Indian family hangs up wind chimes every spring. The Latino couple hosts a barbecue every July. And every once in a while, someone makes a joke about writing a passive-aggressive fine. We all laugh. Then someone inevitably looks toward the end of the street and says, "Remember when Karen lived here?" And we all go quiet for a second, not out of fear, but because we know now we'll never let someone like that run things again. In the end, Karen called the cops on a man she assumed was beneath her, but she forgot the first rule of power. Don't start a war with someone who's got the keys to the courthouse.